We're joining now. Okay, people are starting to join now. Okay, I don't know what happened there, Ian.
Oh, it's all good. Is it going through now?
Yep, people are starting to come in at the meeting.
Yep, and we're recording now as well.
Okay. Okay, for those that are joining us, we're going to wait a few minutes. Thank you. Had a few technical difficulties, so we're a couple of minutes late. We appreciate your patience.
Okay, philosophical debate going on in the other room. Yeah.
Ian, are you in slideshow, full slideshow mode?
I believe so. Can you see that first screen?
I can see your, yeah, I can. I can just see your tab at the bottom, your windows at the bottom. So once, yeah.
What should I do? Stop share?
Stop share and present again. Go into presentation mode. More people joining us. If you're joining us, just hang tight for a few minutes. We're almost there. Now share your screen, Ian.
Okay, let's see.
And go into full slideshow mode.
Okay. Share. That one.
Slideshow. Yep, we've got the slideshow. Many of the usual suspects that have been at all of our webinars so far. Bertine.
How's that look?
Andrew Bailey. Brand, that's perfect. Thank you.
Thank
Brandon
you.
Cavett, a lot of familiar names. Andy, we're good. Gary Island's on again. Yep. Emily Beaumont. Yep. Jesus, Jerry Lawson. Let's say familiar names. Jovan, Kelsey in Hawaii. Shout out to Kelsey. Luciano Fusco in the house. Manish has been on all of them. Again, there's a lot of people on. I can't get everyone's name. Pat Uriz is on. Paul O'Brien. Zach Masters, I think, has been at most of them as well.
A lot of pressure. There's a lot of top scouts on.
There's a lot of talent. The talent ID guy. Okay, it's 12:05. I think we'll get started. We have a significant number of people on the call. Thank you for your patience. First of all, we had a little technical glitch just before we started, but we're there now. I was probably getting a little bit too complacent because this is now our fourth webinar, and hopefully the idea is that we get better as we go along, but we had a little setback. So we're running a few minutes behind. I appreciate everyone's patience. My name's David Robertson. I'm the Coach Education Coordinator. Delighted to have Ian Mork, our Director of Scout and Present. Ian's background and resume speaks for itself. I think most of you know the level he's worked at and continues to work at, and we're very lucky to have him work for NorCal on a regular basis and present some of his great knowledge with us here today. Ian will give you an overview in just a second. A few housekeeping things. As with the previous webinars, everyone's automatically on mute. You can ask questions using the Q&A feature, not the chat. So if you use the Q&A, I'll try and answer, or not try and answer, I'll pose the questions to Ian at the right moment, and we'll answer as many as we can. Everything that Ian shares today, including the videos, will be available on our NorCal website. We'll also email you a direct link after the meeting is over. The meeting itself, the webinar, will be recorded, and the copy of the recording will also be made available to you as well. So without much further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Ian Mork.
Okay, thank you so much, David. Thank you everyone for being here. Hope all of you are safe and healthy at home with your families right now during this unprecedented hiatus, obviously. Want to jump right into it. Sorry we're a few minutes behind, but we'll try to get through this. And there is quite a bit of information. So the PowerPoint police might track me down here because I know I might have too many words on some slides and other things that maybe aren't the best practices, but we want to make it available and I want to try to share as much as I can with you. So this is the idea here. As just the introduction. So the subject is to try to focus more on the talent identification within your environment, which is the competitive club environment. A practical application for all of you that are training at least 3 days a week with your teams. And specifically, we're going to get into the planning, the evaluating, and the selection. And then the audience is mainly from U12 to U19. Talk a little bit about the ages below U12, but that's going to be our main focus are those ages. Okay, I wanted to start with this because feels like a lot of you that are probably on this call, I know, and a lot of our NorCal coaches, they obviously already have a good eye for talent because of players that they've recommended to get into our PDP program or recommended for our PDP program, and those players that have gone on to excel a little bit more. So I think we counted almost 7 of these players have already signed professional contracts. Trayvon here, Luis Arriaga I know has, Alfonso Campo Chavez from Merced, played in the U17 World Cup for the US, great honor, we're really proud of. Eduardo Blancas is in professional clubs, the Galaxy, and now I think the Earthquakes. I think he's potentially on track, but we'll see. I don't think he's signed yet. Roberto Hattigan, I know Gilbert Fuentes obviously has. Let's see. We also have Stuart Ritchie here is playing also in Europe. We have quite a few of these guys playing in Europe and Germany, Holland, and Centeno's FC Dallas. Quincy Butler's also in Germany. So just want to say this is great for us to see that we're able to help our players to reach this next level, and have to give a lot of you credit for that as well. This is just a little bit about what I'm currently doing. So my current positions, as David mentioned, Director of Scouting. I'm also scouting with the U.S. national team still. I'm assistant coach with the ID2 national selection for many years now. Also coach education instructor, and in the past worked with U.S. Soccer as technical advisor, and I worked in Belize for the federation for about 2.5 years there as well, coaching the first team. There's the education on the right. So just some of my licenses that I've completed. And most recently, the Talent ID Scout license that I'm trying to share quite a bit of that information in here as well, but related to the. So this again is the starting point for us, just the foundations of soccer. This is our NorCal model with our level 1. So obviously we have the game here in the middle. The player and the coach will be the main focus for today. But you're going to see that the club and those core values, structure, and culture has a lot to also do with the Talent ID. So on the left, you'll see that we're going to define what that means, which I think there might be quite a few different definitions, which is fine. Mainly what our vision is for our NorCal club coaches. We'll go through a process a little bit, the evaluation and selection, and then the summary. So I think we start with this. I think everyone has their own definition potentially. That natural aptitude or skill seem to come up a lot in different definitions in different dictionaries. And then you can see some of the words that go along with that. For me with this, I think if we identify a player that's not playing in the competitive environment, but we see that they have a particular quality where we think they can play in the competitive environment, I'm personally labeling that as a talent, that they have that skill, they have that capacity, and we'll get more into that. So then we wanted to define identification as well, which has identifying as part of the definition. So wanted to take that a little bit further, what that looks like. So I think the word recognize is a big part of identifying. So then we try to come up with this definition. This is a challenge. And I want to start too by thanking Andrew Ziemer and Kevin Thorson for helping me kind of look this presentation over and get into some of the details of this. They were a big help. So a coach's ability to recognize and predict potential based on evaluation of current abilities, and always considering these areas as well down below, which we'll get into a little bit more. So that's what we're gonna base this on. So we can start here. Just you know, scouting sometimes is talked about. You want to scout and scout a match. You know, scout an opponent. We're going to just say for now that scouting is the act of identifying talent. So question for all of you to think about for one moment is, what level are you scouting for? And do you have a process? So I think you could see here on the right, some of these players you might recognize. So this is the key for us, that you're able to translate it and apply it to your level of what you're scouting for. And that you're developing these players to compete in this competitive level and reach their full potential. So it's really important that you do develop this process to help them reach a higher level. So as an example, you're here in the competitive level. Some of you may be almost top amateur. You have first teams. Maybe you're striving to become a professional club with the first team. You might have teams in your club that fall in between here a little bit. They're training more than a few times a week, but they're at a lower level than your top teams. So you could be scouting here, and then also kind of scouting here when you have tryouts and you're trying to bring more players into your club. For these players here, this is at a national training center for U.S. Soccer. And so some of these players now, Sebastian being with the Earthquakes, Alex Acala has actually been with the Mexican national team now for a few years. But his club environment's not a professional environment, but he's certainly on his way to potentially be there. So we're kind of looking more at the National Training Center at the professional, almost level players, some of them from professional clubs. But it's almost this top tier, the competitive, and to see if they can play international, just to give you guys a perspective. So these are the key moments within this methodology that we want to cover: the planning, the evaluating, and the selecting. So if you look at this slide, there's quite a bit of information, but these are the areas to focus on, right? Before you see a player, and then as you're watching a player, and then obviously after the player is observed. The planning is a big piece of this. That's the preparation. What is the event? Which we'll go into a little bit more detail. The process and observational tools. So what are the responsibilities during that moment? If it's a tryout, as an example, what forms do you use? Do you have a player profile? Do you have a rating system? Are you familiar with all of that? And then we're going to go into the actual evaluation. That's the action of the observation. So you're there on the field and you're actually watching. The reporting, so how are you going to transfer that? And then the actual selection, the decision. Okay. So here's the planning. We'll go into this more in the part 2 as well. We're going to dive even deeper into this because from my experience, I found that this becomes really important. If you're, if you're able to research a player a little bit, maybe you've already seen some video, maybe you've watched, let's take an example of a recreational game where someone's told you about a player that's scoring a ton of goals and the level seems to be too easy for them, and you actually go watch them play in their environment, as an example. Have you watched video? You have stats on them. What is the reputation, as an example? Are you observing a player at a tryout? Are you observing a player, this screen is hiding, there we go, observing at a game? So maybe it's a high school game even you're watching, or as I mentioned, a recreational game. Are they on trial? So you're observing them as a guest player at training, or maybe you see them even playing street soccer. Happens sometimes, as an example. So I don't like that sound, David. You still there, David?
Yeah, we're good. No issues on this end.
It's not letting me advance.
Okay.
You want to? There we go.
There
Okay.
you go.
It
Just
woke
meant
up.
to give it a little punch, the good old fashioned one. Kick.
All right. As I get through this, we can go if there's a few questions already.
I do have some questions. Do you want to take them now,
Yeah,
or
sure.
okay? Someone's asking what NorCal's position, and I'm not sure we have a position as such. But what then is your opinion on biobanding?
Yeah, we'll get there. I think it's really important.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll definitely speak about that a little bit. And I think there's something to it for sure. So this is the process and the observational tools. So, what are the staff responsibilities? So who's leading, who's scouting, pre and post meetings? What does that look like? How many are observing? We could take a tryout. I think a tryout is a perfect example because I think many of you have to go through that process. And what does the organization of that look like? Your scout forms. Are they organized to record observations as quick as possible? Player profile, and that's based a lot on your club's vision on the game, style of play, values of the club, and then do you have a rating system? So I wanted to show you an example. And this is just a few examples of how we relate this in our level, where we actually have these competitive players and we're trying to evaluate them to see if they can be the top of these players that we have inside of our program. So our responsibilities. A lot of times we'll do our best to organize a PDP session so that if it's specific to evaluate players, especially when we have a large number, we'll have someone running the session, and then we'll have someone else, other coaches that are actually just observing. And I think that's an important piece. I think it can be really challenging. I've experienced it. I'm sure all of you have as well. You're trying to run the session. You're trying to set up the fields. You have to pick the teams. You have to make sure all the players get equal time. You have to, organize the positions and then you have to actually evaluate. So determine beforehand, which I'm sure a lot of you already do. I think it's really helpful. And we're still trying to perfect that process, but I think that's an important point. And then scout forms as well. What does that look like for you? Is it just a roster? Are you just taking your own notes? We have ours organized with our technical, tactical, the personality, and the physical pieces for us, so that we can take pretty quick notes and not have to look down too much. Player profile. And this is, again, these are all areas that we feel is important for you to know. You have to know all of this before you actually step on the field to evaluate. So are you familiar with the player profile? We try to educate our coaches over the years. We have done our best to educate our PDP coaches, who are essentially our scouts, in our style of play. What type of players we're looking for, our values, and then again, based off of the T2P2, what we call the T2P2. The rating system. And I think this is really valuable, also used with US soccer. And this is just to have a specific rating that can relate to where you see the player is maybe at. So whatever it might be, if you have 1 to 5 and you say this player is a 4, well, for you, maybe that means, in your club, maybe that means that they're almost at a national level or a professional level. And a 3 is maybe your average, as an example. And for us at PDP, we have specific ratings for a regional level player. So if we give them a 2 rating, then for us, that means that they're at the level of the regional. If it's a 2.5 as an example, then we feel that they're a little bit above the average level. And then when we start to talk about 3 and 3.5, we're talking about the state pool. And then we're talking about even top in the state pool. So those can really help, especially ongoing ratings, because you can compare them and start to build a little bit of a database on those ratings, or record, I should say. Before we go there, any questions, David?
No questions.
Good. That means I've confused everyone, or I'm moving way too fast.
Well, can I ask a question from
sure.
Can I ask a question? Can I wear another hat? So this whole process, you would recommend following it for just a regular club tryout, correct? I know that obviously that's specific to PDP, but this is something you would follow if you're running your club tryouts at the start of the year, the same consistent norms.
Yeah, I think these are this is a piece of it. Yes, I think these are some of the main points that we wanted to emphasize. I will say a lot of coaches, they're really good at this already. I mean, they already have this in their mind. They've been coaching so long. They've been watching players for so long. They're already doing this. They already have an idea of what the player profile is in their mind. And they have an amazing ability to even remember afterwards and share with you a lot of details in the 4 areas. You know, we have some of our PDP coaches that could watch a player and tell you already about what they think technically and the reading of the game and their personality and the physical piece. And I think whatever that is, and it might be different for each club, and I'm sure there are a lot of similarities as well, but I think it is important to go into a trial with this base. And then the long answer, sorry, David, is that, you know, this staff responsibility piece, I've seen where, you know, you can really do a disservice to the players because you're not that organized and you're really not getting a great rating on all of the players.
Yeah.
And whether you select them or not, I think it's really important that you have reasoning. Not just that, oh, well, no one has notes on that player, so they don't make it. I mean, I feel we have to be really careful with that. I don't feel that it's fair to the players. And I think a lot of that has to go down to the organization of it all. So yeah, be a recommendation. Yep.
Great. We did get a few questions come in about grading evaluation forms. I know we have some at the PDP level we can share, but people are asking, can we share evaluation rating forms?
Yep, great question. So the process, so let me go back here. So this planning, so these two, this is going to be part 2 of the webinar next week. And then we'll dive further into this and give a lot of examples, and we'll dive further into all of this too and give examples. And I even have some examples from the Talent ID course of what England's doing and what Holland is doing and you know, and Belgium and different countries, and then our own PDP and the US national teams. I wanted to take the time to dive further into that. So I think that will come in the next webinar. And then this evaluating piece and selecting, which I think a lot of us, when we think about talent identification, we go straight into this evaluation. That's going to even be its own webinar in the part 3. So we will share a lot of that, but it's not in this presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I think this is an important one. You know, do you see, when you look at this, do you already have an opinion? I mean, they haven't even played yet. You haven't even seen them play. And maybe you've already formed an opinion based on just, you know, the way they look right here. I will give you a hint here. 42, he's a goalkeeper. So, and he's still probably one of our tallest goalkeepers in the whole program. But I'll get into this a little bit deeper. So this is now getting to the evaluation piece. So I'm going to play this. Keep your eye on this. This is LAFC versus LA Galaxy. This was 2006's. Quite a few of these players were at the last camp that we had for 2006 for the national team. So I'm going to play it again and just let you know that my focus for this was this number 11 right here. So try to play it again. So if you can keep your eye on him, he's right here receiving that pass. It's the same on your side as mine. And so just kind of try to keep your eye on him. He goes out of the screen a little bit. So this is something to think about now with this. So now you're on the field and the players are starting to play, and obviously we're watching a video, but you know, you're on the field. And so with that, where are you positioned on the field? I mean, all these questions, again, this is something you can look at later. And which players are you focused on? And are you trying to watch all of them? It's difficult. Are you talking to other coaches? We see that quite a bit. You know, are you looking at your phone because you're keeping time on your phone, but also some people, they love their phone. Are you only watching the ball? You know, are you focusing on one field, or are there two fields at the same time because you're at a tryout and you're trying to watch that field and watch that field, and you see something that goes well on one field and you make a little note? It can be really difficult. You're just watching one team. And then can you easily identify the players? In the past, I don't know if this still happens, they would write a number, you know, on their leg or on their arm. It can be really difficult to see, as an example. Or do they have jerseys? Obviously, that's much easier. And then can you ensure that every player gets a fair opportunity to be evaluated? So if we go back to this player, and the reason that I selected him was because I also want to emphasize, as much as we look at the late developers, look at the size he's already at compared to this late developer who's trying to mark him in the game. But I want to make sure we don't take away from this player that already has some great qualities. And he usually does play with the 2005s for LAFC, but in these big games, they bring him to play again. So that was why I wanted to bring that up in this point, was as we go a little bit further into this, it's really difficult to see qualities in every single player. Even just in this video, you can start to pick up a little bit on each of them, but if you just watch him and his movement, and you'll see him check his shoulder a few times, right there, I think he's probably out of position. There he checked his shoulder, he opens up with his first touch, and then a nice weighted pass as an example. So also not only looking for the late developers, but we just have to try to recognize what his qualities are. And I'll go further into that. So always considering, this will be really important. And again, we'll go into more depth. A special trait, right? We've had it in PDP a few times where a player just has the ability to score goals, and you watch them and they're physically struggling kind of to keep up. Technically, really, they don't look very good, but they scored a lot of goals, you know, if that's the case. Or they have Olympic speed, as an example, whatever it might be, but a really special trait. Their biological age, obviously, okay, their maturation, their chronological age. And within that, what is the relative age effect? So are they born in the first part of the year or later in the year? That can make a big difference. So these are all important things to consider. What learning environment are they currently in? You know, are they at a recreational club that your club is actually helping educate and a part of? And so you kind of know the environment they're coming from and that they're already getting decent coaching, that can make a huge difference. Or are they at a club that really doesn't have much structure and they're still able to play at this level or to show their qualities? I think is really important to consider. And home environment. We have a player from Vallejo that came out. He was with the club. He was with Vallejo United, I think. And I'm pretty sure he left the club, and then he showed up at one of our trials again, at one of our trainings, PDP again in Vallejo. And he said that he had to walk there. He said he couldn't continue with the club because his mom works and he's only with his mom, you know. And so his personal life, we have to consider that. If he's showing potential and we feel that he could maybe play at a higher level, if he can get in a different environment, as an example, then it's something you have to consider as well. And you can go into more depth with that. But you know, if you have the ability to know about their environment, both their learning environment and their personal and home environment, it can be very helpful. Whoops. So this is a 2005 player, Alex Acala, playing against Sac Republic U17s. Those were all 03s and 04s. I could watch that 100 times, that first touch. So these are some challenges, right? You know, what did you see? Obviously, it would make a difference, I think, if you watch it more than once. But if you're at a tryout, again, as an example, then you only get that moment unless you're recording it. And what qualities did you notice in him? So you can think about, for an example, for us, and I have it below, if you comment on each of them, you know, you could probably already say something about Alex Acala, who scored the goal, his technique, obviously you could see, his awareness and the timing of that run, and his decision-making, right, as he continued to go closer to the goal, his athletic ability, you saw him kind of jump the tackle and then keep going. And then also about his personality. And I think also there it's important that you can't just see all the players in that moment, because you're probably focused on the ball, but you could see the players that came to him and said, good job, as an example. That says something about their personality as well. So how many players could you effectively evaluate in that one moment? And then obviously, can you comment? And then we have to think about, is there a difference between evaluating boys and girls, which would go back to a little bit our planning and what your club, if your club differentiates at certain ages. So I wanted to mention for players U12 and below as well, because we're mainly focused. I put these down just as some of my thoughts. Spoke with Benjamin Ziemer a little bit about it, and also Andrew and some of my other colleagues. This you might have your own definitions for what you're looking for with the younger ages, but I think these are some important points that I'll let you just read through, you know. But you can maybe already recognize, you know, and I don't know how all of you were that played at a higher level. I know there are a lot of guys on this call that played at a high level. And some may have been a top talent already at 12 years old, potentially. And you could already see it. For me personally, I think you could probably see that I love the game. I love the ball. I didn't understand the game very well at that age, because I was just playing on my own and trying to teach myself almost. I wasn't in an environment with a lot of coaching. I also dribbled way too much. I remember getting in trouble a lot for trying to beat a guy and beat another guy and then losing the ball. And but also my personality, I was very competitive. So maybe a coach at that time could see some of those qualities in me that says, okay, maybe this player can go a little bit further. But at those young ages, you know, a lot of the players have a lot of these qualities, to be honest, at those young ages. It's after that if they continue to be ambitious in what we do with them. So then I want to talk a little bit about the selecting as well. So now you've evaluated them. And now you have to actually transfer those observations into reporting to your director, or maybe you're the one that's in charge of making your own team. And so you have to figure out a way to transfer that. Maybe you just have notes on your roster, whatever it might be. But then within the club, is there a database of players? Is it just with the rosters? Are you tracking players? And then the selection is the actual selection. Communicating with the former club, and who's doing that? What does that look like? When they're not selected, are you? If it's a giant tryout, you probably don't have to, and you might make that clear from the beginning. If you're asking someone to come on trial, then there probably needs to be some type of communication. And then if you go back to the points before, you're going to have to share with them what you saw in the player. Do you have notes on every player? And then for new players that you add, I think this is where you start their player profile, if that's what you have. So that's kind of the beginning of that step, or that process. So to summarize, first we want to really clarify the level that you're scouting for. I think that becomes really important. And then the planning. Okay, mention it quite a bit. It's the preparation, what event, what is it? What does your process look like? The observational tools. The evaluating, obviously a lot of other points in them. These are some of the main points that we'll go into more detail about in the third part. So we can go into, and I think that's where biobanding will come in as well. And then the actual selecting. I really see this as happening all the time, to be quite honest. I mean, even as a coach, I feel like if you're at your own training and you've selected players and you're watching them in a training, you're almost going through this checklist in your mind of a lot of what it is when you're just watching at a tryout. So I think a lot of you probably already have that. But I think for myself included, there's still areas that I can develop and improve as well. So I guess you just have to try to look inside a little bit and see if there are any areas where you could improve. And there are obviously a lot of youth coaches that we have that already have this knack for talent identification. And I'd say some of them, it's a real strength. They've built great teams already. They know what they're looking for in certain positions. And they know if a player has the ability to play at that level within their team. So I think there are a lot of coaches that already have this piece there. I think it's important that we start to share this knowledge a little more and experiences about what these challenges and constraints can be, and you develop the competencies as well. And that scouting and examination process comes a lot from the leadership as the club as well. And then the self-development, for us, it's the same for both players and coaches. A quote from one of our mentors for sure. And this was his vision on it. I like the spirit, you're not just focused on the technique, but also the spirit. And how about the pleasure? Let's not forget about that. I mean, you could see a lot if the kids are having fun, and hopefully that's at the top of the list for a lot of us. So this is one for you to watch after this. The Goldmine Effect, some of you maybe have seen it. It's outstanding. It talks a lot about the potential versus the performance. And then in the next, the next webinar, we'll dive deeper into that as well. Okay.
Some questions, Ian?
Yep, definitely.
Okay, Macias reference, you mentioned the environment sometimes been a challenge and that you can't look beyond the environment. When you identify the problem with the player environment, how do you deal with it?
If their environment, their personal or their learning environment, or which one?
I'm reading that.
Okay.
Macias
Well,
and you, if you wanted to come in, I think he's just talking about maybe their home environment. It might be a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, well, hopefully you can create. Hopefully you can help. You can help them by getting through to them with an environment where they can excel and reach their full potential with you, and keeping that in mind. If it's about the environment they're coming from, well, if you select them, well, then you know that they're going to come with some deficiencies. Maybe it's the technical side or the understanding of the game, but maybe they have a personality where they're very competitive and they're attentive, and they want to get better, they want to improve, they have a growth mindset, and maybe physically too, they can already keep up with the speed of play at that level. So then I think you just harness what their strengths are and you try to recognize areas they need to improve on inside your environment if you select them. Now, if you recognize that the learning environment that they're in, that it's at a lower level, and so you're actually not going to select them because they don't have qualities to play at the competitive level that you're evaluating for. I mean, then maybe you could try to reach out to the leadership of that club, and you could see if you could help in any way, or check in with them, or I think the more clubs that start to make partnerships at different levels, I think the better for our entire soccer landscape here in NorCal. Even at Holland at the highest level, you have professional clubs that are making partnerships with top amateur clubs. So I think the more partnerships and the more we can work together, I think the better for everybody. So I don't know if that answered it, Macias, but I'd be happy to speak to you again about it if we need.
Yeah, there's quite a few more questions, Ian. I thought you weren't getting off that easy. They'll come in late. Okay, so Logan Lee is asking, to summarize it, is there any data to show out of the four T2, P2, one being more impactful than any of the others in a player's development? And segueing into Benjamin has a question: what's more important, quality, technique, tactical, personality, or physical? So maybe there's data to answer Logan's question, and then maybe there's an opinion to answer Benjamin's question, or both.
Yeah, I think there might be data. Maybe he could share some with us. I think there's a lot of different data. One that I usually see is, some feel that talent is 20% you're born with, 80% is hard work. I don't know if that's the right ratio. I think, it's up to every club and coach to define that for themselves. What is more important? Obviously, for really young players, when we're watching players, below 12 years old, now they're 12, they're 13, and they do have a high degree of technical ability already, it says a lot that they've already spent a lot of time with the ball. So I think if you see that you can recognize whether they've done it by playing street soccer, or they've done it at their club they're at, or they've done it training on their own or in their backyard, for me, that holds a ton of weight right away. If their technique is at a level already at a really young age where you can recognize, okay, that player's already comfortable with the ball and they have the ability to have their head up quite a bit. And now we can maybe try to help them with recognizing more on the tactical side. But with that being said, do they have the athleticism to keep up with the speed of play, and even getting through puberty, and then after that, to play at a higher level and even beyond competitive, or even at the competitive level? Because you do see some players that technically they're amazing, And tactically, they even start to really read the game. They have a great personality. But the physical piece, if they don't have some of those genes, which Paulo, spoke about quite a bit in the psychomotor webinar a few days ago, I mean, there might be some point where they reach their full potential and their top level. So personally, I think it's a real balance between all of them. And I think if you can recognize what some of their top qualities are at a young age, and you harness those, and then you try to also help in the areas where they can improve, then we're going to really help players reach their full potential and reach a higher level. And it might be different for other clubs, to be honest. Some clubs might only want winners, they might only want physically really strong players. I mean, I hope not, but interesting model from Real Madrid, where the physical piece at the young ages is really important for them. If they can't compete and battle and keep up with the physical elements at those levels, then and maybe that comes before the rest. So yeah, I don't know if I really answered the questions, but I think it's up to each of the clubs and each of the coaches to come up with what is important for them.
Okay, great. There's quite a few more questions.
Sure.
Jesus is asking, do you consider when considering playing a player up, do you consider the relative age effect? If they're a late birthday, early bloom, like January birthday, December birthday, is that taken into consideration when playing a player up? Where they are in the calendar?
I think playing players up, it's more, for me, it's more the maturation, and if they sometimes they're maturing with their personality more, and they're maturing with the ability to kind of take on more because of their birthday, of when they were born. So they might be ahead of players that are of their same age. But really, when you're playing players up, it's, can they handle it? Can they handle the speed of play? Even if they're smaller, as an example, can they handle the physical demands still, if they're really about 2 years apart biologically of some of the players that they're playing against? Because there is a point where that can be detrimental too. So I think you really have to find that balance. So for me, I don't know that it's always set like that. I think it's different for every player. Relative age effect too. I mean, I looked, I think Pele, Maradona, I saw Mbappe. I saw some of their birthdays. They're like September, October. I mean, so what, I mean, yeah. So I don't know how much that held them back when they were young or not, but I think it all comes down to what level can the players still perform at and keep up with the speed of play if you're going to play players up. There's also the bio-banding of playing players more, where we're playing players more at their biological level, at their maturation level. And I think that can also be really beneficial. So, yeah.
Okay, here's a good one, because
Right.
I think pretty much everyone here deals with big numbers at club tryouts. Basically, Ben Lamelli's asking, what do you recommend for a tryout format for large numbers?
Yeah, so that, we're going to go into that, by the way, next week with the planning piece. I wanted to be able to break that down a lot, and I know this might seem really general, and we're not really getting into specifics with this first one, but it was a little overwhelming for me to try to fit it all into one presentation really quick, because there are so many different parts of this. And that, I think, is a really important piece and a great question. It really comes down to, what do you have for your staff? How many people do you have available? What's the field situation? Do you have enough space? Do you already know, do all of the coaches that are evaluating, do they already know what they're looking for? And then how can you divide it so that every player gets equal time and every player gets a fair opportunity to be evaluated. Like for us in the 4 areas. So the best thing to probably do is to add another day of tryouts, to be honest, and not try to make decisions too quick. And if for us in PDP, if one of our coaches who are scouts at the time have something that they see in a player, then we usually bring them back almost always to see him again. Even if other coaches are saying, I'm not sure, he's at the level, we bring him back. So my advice would be to try to spread it out if you have big numbers, to where you can create the opportunity for every player to be seen and for you to have notes and a clear evaluation on every player that shows up. And it can be really challenging, but I think that's what we've signed up for, to be honest. Like if we're gonna have tryouts, and especially if you're gonna have an open tryout and you tell everyone you have 1 day to show yourself, well, then you've made it clear that you have 1 day. But I think if you're trying to build teams and you're asking players, especially if you're asking players that you would like them to come try out, well, for me, I think you owe it to them to have a really clear observation or evaluation of them. So you have to give yourself enough time to observe them.
Thank you. A couple more questions.
Yep.
For the PDP program, are you looking for the same player profile for all players, or do you look at different mix of P2, P2 across the pool?
It depends on the age, and it depends on what we're looking, what level we're looking at for them. So as they get, as they're in the regional, we're looking to actually build a team that can play against the other regions. So they do start to get position specific a little bit. So then we might have a little bit more weight on a player's ability to read the game and ability to play different positions, which I think is another really important piece. If you identify a player has the ability to play more than one position, especially at younger ages, that can hold a lot of weight. So if we see players within PDP that we think can fit into the team, or maybe they are already the top number 9, or maybe they're a great 8, but they also could play the 2, and we don't have very many 2s in that region, as an example. Then that part of their personality, that they're willing to play different positions, that part of the tactical side, that they have the ability to play another position as well. But maybe their technique's not the greatest, but they have a great personality, and they're always playing to win, and they're always paying attention. They're focused, they're concentrating, they have a growth mindset, they want to reach a higher level. Then that's where we just have to try to find that balance. So it's not that we just have it in one box. And then for the older ages, the state pool, we start to go into the positional profiles more, and we start to really look for, okay, how many number 10s do we have, which is usually about 20 out of a group of 60 or something. And then we really have them competing more for a position, but always in mind that maybe if they can play another position, it's definitely helpful. But then they're competing a little bit more. They're competing specifically for a position. So that's where the tactical piece and their understanding of the game and their ability to take on more tactical information becomes really important as well. And they have to check the other boxes as well. I have to say, the players we get in PDP, for the most part, the personality piece, it's usually not an issue. I think they've been recommended for a reason, or we've scouted and recognized their qualities in their personality, that they're a team player, that they're already a leader, and so a lot of times that's a plus for them coming into the PDP most of the time. So we can go further in to the physical piece if they can keep up with the speed of play, and then we can go more into how is their technique related to them making decisions, and that kind of that technical speed, so to speak, of how they can relate the technique to the tactic. So.
Ian, that's a good segue in, and you just touched on it, but Enrique Blancas is asking how much value do you place on character and personality? I think I know what you'll say, but for the rest.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big one. And I think it's, you know, to even reach the highest level, like for US soccer as an example, it's one of their key qualities is the ability for a player to take responsibility for their own development. You know, so are they always showing up on time? Do they have all their equipment? Are they serious in the warm up? Are they taking care of themselves off the field, at home, their diet, you know, training on their own and so on? It's that, that has a lot to do with their personality. And if we talk about reaching the highest levels, then I think that has to be there. There was a great study that came out, that I'll share in one of the other webinars about what the professionals, they did a study in Europe. It was about what did professionals value the most in their development years? Why do they think they have this ability to reach a higher level? And most of them said up an age group and playing against older players when they were young. One answer. And for me, that has a lot to do with the personality as well. So obviously they had the ability in the other areas, but they had that personality where they were able to take on more pressure. You know, they were serious about reaching that next level. And I think more and more that's becoming a key piece.
Thank you. And I think one more question.
Sure.
This is maybe not directly related to scouting, or it could be. Are we producing top international players, U23, U21, U19? If not, what are we lacking? How do we rectify this at the youth ages? I know you could probably talk for a while on that one, but I thought that's a good one just to stimulate.
Well, I think we are. I mean, I don't know. What are we comparing it to? I mean, some of the players in the first slide that I showed you have been called into our U20 national team already. And a lot of them have been with our youth national team. So something's happening there, but you know, I think that's a little bit I think it's a good conversation maybe and discussion for another day, because it has a lot to do with the structure as well. And I think we can only control what we can control here within our environment. And the better we can do with identifying our players' qualities within our competitive environment, and then help them along the way once they join us in their talent development and really helping them reach their full potential, then maybe we can help to support that higher level and have more players that graduate to play at the professional level and with the national teams. But as far as the structure and what's happening above us, I'm gonna wait to discuss that another day.
You already plead the fifth. Okay, well, great, Ian. Thanks a ton.
Sure.
You know, I think as you mentioned, this is part one of a three-part series.
Yeah.
I'll obviously give you the closing comments, but just for everyone, thanks for all the questions. There's a lot. Unfortunately, we couldn't get to all of them. We will share the video of the presentation, the presentation itself, and any associated links that Ian shared. Again, on behalf of NorCal, thank you very much for attending. Ian, final words from you.
Yeah, I would just encourage all of you to watch this when you get an opportunity. And there's a ton of information out there, obviously, that we can look at to try to see what are people's views on identifying talent. I don't think this is set in stone necessarily. This is just from experience, and from the experience that we've gained here within the PDP especially. So hopefully we'll get back on the field soon and we can start to apply a lot of this. So I hope that piece is helpful. And again, next week, we'll dive into the details a lot more with all of this. So thank you for your time. Really appreciate it, and be safe, everybody.
And it's Friday night. You've got nothing else to do, so you've all got homework, the Goldmine Effect.
Get some fresh air.
Get some fresh air. Okay, thank you. Take care, everyone.